All right, welcome back to class. I am so excited to have Jake Gallen and James Silvas here to talk with all of you today. As you know, our class is focused on the topic of resources and the intersection with power. We're going to have a conversation starting off about resources in the form of life and work on the Strip, particularly what it means to work in the nightlife. And James and Jake both have a fascinating, I think, range of stories about their early starts in their careers, working for places including Marquee. So we're going to have a fun time, I think, walking down memory lane with both of you. We'll also transition to talk about their current careers. I'll have them both introduce themselves in a moment. I will tell you briefly here that Jake and James are both leaders in our community. They are alumni of UNLV, and I am proud to call both of them my friends. Please welcome Jake Gallen and James Silvas to class. This is going to be mostly a conversation with all of you. I'm going to start off by asking them some questions. If you have questions at any point, please feel free to raise your hands. Both Jake and James are here to talk with all of you. And please feel free to introduce yourself, tell them your name, your major, and we'll go from there. So thank you both so much for coming to class today. My first question is, what was your experience like early on the Strip? Where did you work, and what was a starting role, let's say, that brought you into that setting? Jake, let's begin with you.
Oh man, so I actually worked on the Strip for 10 years across 2 different places. So it's actually pretty fortunate because in the industry there's actually a high turnover rate. My first 5 years while I was in college, I worked at Planet Hollywood Party Pool as a lifeguard, and then worked my way up to be a cabana host. And then my last 5 years, from 2015 to 2020, I worked at Omnia Nightclub as a model beverage runner. Got to open up the nightclub, go through that crazy, chaotic experience, and kind of learn really like the power of money and sexuality on the Strip, and just seeing that combination with relationships. And also, like, the community at UNLV was very similar. I was in Greek life here at UNLV, and I saw a lot of the things in Greek life here extend over into the nightlife and industry in Las Vegas. So very crazy and chaotic experience. Ended up stopping after the pandemic and pursuing entrepreneurship full time.
And Jake, can you walk us through, before we turn to James, what is the power ladder or the hierarchy in a club in terms of who's working there?
Yeah, if we start at the bottom, it's what's called porters. It's essentially the janitors, and then you have the bussers, which are just the table attendants. So whenever you're getting VIP table service, you generally are given a bottle server and a busser. I like to call myself the slave to the table, just pouring juice and ice, and just ask whatever the guest needs, whether it's something random like they need cards out on the floor, or root beer out in the main room where we don't serve it in the nightclub. That's kind of like the busser's duties. And then you have bartenders, and then servers, maybe managers, then servers, and then VIP hosts is really at the top. They kind of run everything. They bring all of the tables in, all of the whales, or people who are spending 5, 6, 7 figures at a night in a nightclub, and they coordinate everything else that comes to the table with girls and the relationships, and maintaining the relationships even outside of the nightclub, and sometimes even helping them have a very fun Vegas experience outside of wherever they're setting up the table service for.
Now, James, where did you fit into this when you started out working in the industry?
I graduated from UNLV, as Payal mentioned, and I was in the physical therapy space, working at a clinic as a technician, making $9 an hour. And I was like, no, not for me. I needed to make more money. And what do you do when you live in Vegas, entertainment capital of the world? It's natural for you to want to work in the industry, at least it was for me. So I attempted to audition at Wet Republic the first time I had the thought of getting into the industry, and I didn't make it, obviously. Had to wait another year. And because I did Greek life here as an SAE, any SAEs? Shout out to you. I knew somebody who worked at Marquee, or who knew someone who worked at Marquee. And I got in the door there, I interviewed, and they accepted me. And my first year in the industry was a busser at Marquee Dayclub. Slave labor, what it felt like. Working double shifts, sometimes making good money, but like you're working, you know? So I did 1 year there, and then from there I transitioned to Wet Republic, which is like one of the hardest places to get into, or at least it was when I was there. 4,000 people audition for 26, 28 positions. So either you have to know somebody, or your audition has to literally be impeccable, and they just gotta like you a lot. And the audition process is really insane. Like, you have to go in shirtless in your bathing suit. Women have to go in bikinis. And you kind of feel like a piece of meat. Like, they're looking at you like, turn. Mm-hmm. Okay. And they ask you 3 questions. What's your name? James Silvas. Experience? Or no, do you have any modeling experience? Yes. And where have you worked the last couple months? Here, here, here. Cool, got it, thanks. Like, less than 45 seconds and you're out. So like, talk about having to make an impact in a short amount of time. Wet Republic was great, loved it, many stories, lots of dynamics as Jake talked about. But that's actually where my career started, was there. And we'll get into that, but yeah, that's my experience.
I actually ran into James's wife, Amanda, at the grocery store the other day. Yeah, it was out Sprouts off of Horizon Ridge Parkway. I was looking at salads and I hear my name, and Amanda and I started chatting. She told me that you worked at one position, you'd go back to your car, you'd fall asleep, and then you would continue working. Can you describe that in your own words, or tell the students about that?
So this was Marquee. So like my shifts were Thursday to Sunday. And Marquee, if you've been there, you know that they have a day club during the day and they have a day club at night. And you can work both shifts. You can, they more like you have to. But the interesting thing about that is, like, during the day, there's different furniture than at night. So after your long day shift, working in 115-degree heat, you now have to flip the venue. So you're gonna take all that furniture, all that heavy furniture, sometimes get lamps or heating lamps because it gets cold at night because it's really windy and it's really high up. Like, you have to take all of that down a 32 steps, like a flight of stairs, off the side of the casino, store it on the side, and then bring the nighttime furniture up those stairs and place it in the scenery. And so that was part of the labor, and then obviously the service that was provided. But there were many, many weekends where I would have like a 2 to 4 hour turnaround time, and there's no point in going home, getting comfortable, taking a shower and eating, only to get an hour of sleep and then head back. So I would just sleep in my car, wake up, do my hair real quick, brush my teeth, and like get back at it. And that was insane.
Wow.
You're young, so you could do it, but like it was hard.
I know both of you have a number of stories interacting with customers, whales, especially the high net worth individuals that come into the clubs. What's one story you each feel comfortable sharing, interacting with a customer? What was their request, their demand, and how did you respond?
Yeah, actually I have a pretty funny story with one of the largest whales to ever go to Vegas, and actually is now in prison. Pretty popular person, his name's Jolo. There's actually a book written about him called The $1 Billion Whale. I think there's a podcast about him. He was in the news recently. So the second, I guess it's the first industry night, Omnia was open. Industry night is every night a nightclub has a destined day between Sunday to Thursday where it's encouraged for locals to come. They give discounts. And the reason they do this is so that they fill up the nightclub, so that whales like Jolo themselves come in, the club appears busy, and they surround them with girls, women who work for like atmosphere models, and so then those girls then come to the table and encourage them to spend more. So Jolo walks in with, I don't know, this had to be 50, 100 people. This is only the 3rd time I've ever bussed a table. And he comes in and immediately orders 100 bottles of Dom. And I just look at everyone and I'm like, what do I do? So me with no experience, I actually go back, and there's like a standard procedure where you have to like go get champagne glasses, you have to hold it a certain way, you have to approach the table. So I go back and I get, 5 glasses because it's just unexperienced. And I come back and everyone's looking at me like, what are you doing? And so then I end up getting help, and the night ends up being crazy. He ends up spending, I think, like $200,000. There was girls with him, and I don't know. I don't know if anyone here has ever played Edward 40 Hands. It's like a typical college game where you tape 40s around your hands. Well, these girls and this group took it to the next level where they all brought handcuffs. And the girls began handcuffing themselves to each other, to the bottles, and it was just a wild experience. The gentleman ended up tipping $100,000 on the line. And so it was a good night for everyone. They ended up keeping the nightclub open until almost 6 a.m., which is about almost 2 hours longer than what we're generally open for. And that was really what helped me understand that money has a lot of sway, and they'll keep things open. They'll let you push the boundaries of what actually is legal or allowed in the club. And yeah, I didn't learn about who that person was until a few years later when Jolo the whale ended up disappearing. He was the guy who was involved with the IMDb scam, where they stole like a bunch of like billions of dollars from a sovereign wealth fund. It's a very crazy experience.
I have a few follow-up questions. How are the tips distributed? Who got the $100,000?
Yeah, so some of the nightclubs have the tip pool differently, but with nightclubs, at least at Omnia, it was distributed. It's a pooled house. So for us, actually the girls determine what the tip percentages are. I'm pretty sure that's standard across, so the tip percentages change. The girls voted at the very beginning. They gave bussers 25%, girls were 65%, and bartenders were 10. I believe that adds up right, which at the time was the highest tip pool percentage for bussers across the strip. At Omnia, and I think White Republic's the same, where any tip that the guest hands you directly to the busser gets to keep. It doesn't go into the tip pool. So on that line, if they write $100,000 and then they say, I want to give $50,000 to Jake or something like that, then I would get every single thing. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But yeah, he did leave me a little bit on the side, and the rest of it just got split up. And it took almost 2 months for us to get it because of the back-end dealings within the banks and having it approved.
Got it. Another question, in your opinion, and the students have read The Secret Economics of a VIP article as context, what draws a whale to a club here?
Generally it's women, for most, power, the host offering different incentives, whether it's a promise of something outside the club, and this is something that I've learned too, is the relationship between the host and the guest is generally pretty strong, and they usually have a relationship outside of the club, so sometimes they'll go to the Super Bowl together, or their friends know each other, or they're going to party afterwards, and so they'll generally encourage them to come down, hang out for a few hours, and then they usually go and do something else. So one time we had a guest come in and helicopter in with a few Red Sox players on top of the and they landed on top of Caesar's Palace. And so then they I think ended up spending like $1 million as our highest paid table. And so there's all kinds of different dynamics that come into play with it.
Wow. James, the story.
I want to add to that real quick. I think another thing that I was just piecing together right now, for someone who has that kind of money, to be in these environments, you almost feel like you can control the environment depending on how much money you're going to spend and how crazy you want to make a party. So if you know that a place is already popping, it's popular, everyone's going there, like you know it's going to be a thing, and you get there and you feel the vibe, and you're like, I like this. And you put $100,000 and you see the energy rise in a party, you almost have godlike sensations come through you the same way a DJ plays a certain song and everyone goes wild, right? So where else are you going to go where you can have that direct access and influence instantaneously? And the way Vegas is set up, everyone who works in the clubs are so attentive to those individuals, it's literally like you're the owner of the club, or at least it feels like that momentarily when you're that type of person spending that kind of money. So that's what I just pieced together right now, thinking through that.
It's very true. So generally when we get high-paying guests or regulars, they can even have the servers dress up in certain attires to their preference. So we had one gentleman who'd come in twice a month. He was from LSU. The two girls, his favorite ones, would wear LSU jerseys, like just very skimpy bottoms, and that kind of play, especially when you get into like presentations where there's something where if you order a very expensive champagne bottle, generally about 10,000 and up, they bring out different toys. You can put girls in like these Barbie boxes or put them in Star Wars outfits or ninja suits. And so you really play almost into like the fantasies and this, of the guest as well.
Yeah.
And the Jolo experience going back, when they bought all those bottles, the majority of it, he just had us handing out champagne to the dance floor.
Right.
So he was really controlling the energy of the club.
It's insane. So a couple stories. I mean, quick little note ones. Like I've seen celebrities at Marquee specifically come out of, there's like bungalows attached to cabanas, and I would see specifically that person come out of one of those bungalows with a group of women, and draw conclusions, and you're just like, wow, okay, like this really does happen. I've seen people walk out of the bathroom like this, like I'm at Wet Republic, my hands are full, I'm carrying like all these crafts of things, I have ice over my head, I'm like weaving in and out of traffic, meanwhile I'm getting grabbed places, and I like, what was, hey, and I'm like looking back to like, I'm like, no, like, so like this stuff is real. But one in particular was just around money. Like I'm in the cabanas is like, or bungalows are like 10K minimums, right? So you're sitting there, and then this guy goes, James, because I was the busser for him, and he goes, I need ones. I'm like, yeah, what do you need? How much? He's like, 10K. In my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to run to the casino. And this is Wet Republic. So Wet Republic is not attached to the MGM casino. You have to go a good distance to get to the cage where you can exchange that kind of money. So he takes out his wallet, he's flipping through this money, hundreds, and he goes, go give me some ones. And I'm like, this guy better tip me so good. So I'm sprinting to the club, like, because the longer you're gone, the higher the risk is for your section to just get out of hand. Things happen so fast. Fights, throw-ups, anything. Like people are not in their sane mind. So they just do wild, primitive things that you shouldn't see, but you do. And you're like, we're human. And so I'm sprinting there, mindful of the clock. I get to the teller. I'm like, hey, I need $10,000 in ones. She's like, follow me. I get the VIP treatment in the back. She gives me the plastic stacked ones, like packaged. $3,000 I think was like the limit in each package. So I'm running through the casino with 3 packaged, brand new crisp $1 bills. And I'm like trying to cover it with my shirt. I don't want to get jumped. Finally make it back. Like thoughts in my head are like, if I just take 1,000 out of this, I'm not using it now. Didn't. And then I got there and he's like, thanks, James. He starts ripping open the money. I'm like, yeah. Come on, man, you gonna hook me up? He goes, pats me on the back, takes all the money, walks out to the main area and goes, and all of a sudden you just see all these ones just flying everywhere. And everyone looks, they're like, ah! And me, I'm like grabbing, and sweeping it into the bins with the, like you have these like porter type cleaning, if someone throws up, you put it in there. I didn't care, I was just like sweeping money into this. And at the end of the night, I collected like $700 just from grabbing all that money. But like, that's what happens. Like, you have sexual things that you see, and you also have just like wild, crazy money things. So that's just one story that comes to mind.
One of many.
Yeah.
I had a story to share with you all. So a friend recently was saying that when his friends come from out of town to Vegas, it's almost known that that friend is going to disappear by the end of the night. And he and I are both from the East Coast. He's a professor at Nevada State College, and he looks at me and he says, we don't do that on the East Coast, right? You come with your crew, you leave with your crew. What happens after you leave is up to you, but you generally enter and exit the club together. And he was saying how some of his friends come to Vegas and that's the expectation they carry. It's almost as though they're recreating The Hangover. And I'm curious for your thoughts. When you think about the consumer's perspective, again, which we're chatting a little bit about with some of these examples, why do you think Vegas allows people to do what they normally wouldn't choose to do back home, let's say?
That's good.
I think it's the culture. Like it's a vision, it's a fantasy. Like I in psychology, or at least this is how I think about it, when people see individuals with nice cars, they don't look at the person they admire, the person, they look at the person and it reminds them of who they could be, and that's why they have the fascination, right? Well, with Vegas, the way marketing is, the way this city has been built, it's on sin. They make sin okay. And they have areas where you can live out those fantasies and no one's really gonna care, or no one's really gonna share it. And that's very alluring for people who work 9 to 5s, who may hate their jobs, who may be stuck in a sedentary lifestyle, in a marriage that they don't like, just kind of needing some sort of revival from the monotonous grind that they're in. And so they come to a place that is expensive, yes, but the memories that they can create are priceless to them. And I think we all can fall into that depending on wherever we go. Maybe it's not partnering for you, maybe it's going to the French Riviera or Santorini, Greece. Yeah, it's gonna be pricey, but what is the feeling and the memory that you're gonna have by going to those places? Vegas attracts the type of person that wants to party to the ultimate level. Like, that's what this place is. And so that would be my initial kind of answer to that.
Yeah, Vegas generally goes through these like repurposing phases every 10, 20 years. When Vegas first opened, it was generally for the workers at Hoover Dam to come, relax, and hang out. And then in the 70s, it became a little bit more glamorized, like $1 cocktails. You had some of the artists and the musicians come, and this was like a retirement destination. And then in the 90s, it was more kid-friendly. You had the theme parks. MGM theme park was popular. And then recently, it became all about EDM and mega clubs and partying experience. But the one thing that always stayed the same was what James said, is like the dream that you could be somebody else and you can let loose and spend a lot of money and pretend to be somebody else, or embellish that ego that you have, or play a different role. One time I had a guest say that he was with 3 different women, that he had 3 different rooms, and so he had all of his rooms right next to the elevator so he could maintain all of these. And so some people want to play into that like scandalous nature, or some people just want to come and, you know, go to a show and relax with their girlfriend. There's so many different ways that you can show off yourself, but it at the end of the day comes down to satisfying, that dream that you've always wanted to be.
I went on a strip club tour, as I think the class knows, in the fall on the night of daylight savings. And when I think about the experience there, I tell people one word comes to mind: transaction. That there's an exchange of resources, money, to satisfy anything that you really want. And again, the world is sort of your oyster when you come to the strip, and the strip as a business capitalizes on that, right? And I always am struck, I've talked with Jake about this on our podcast, how much people come here and it's a known expectation that you are gonna spend an enormous amount of money. Like James said, that's a known, that's a given on the front end. And in power language then, the strip clubs, the nightclubs, the hosts, they know what their clients value and they do take advantage of that, and it benefits everybody because both parties are willing participants in that transaction.
Yeah. And even if you spend so much money and you don't get the experience that you think you should have had, you almost feel bad about talking about that you didn't have a good time in Vegas. Because so many people have hyped it up that it's like, well, I'm not gonna be the only one that didn't have a good time. Like, who am I to like not find something cool to do? So you don't really hear too much of like the downside of Vegas. It's just propped up on this like, go wild, and everything you do, you can have fun in, you know? So that's also pretty interesting.
Yeah, I talk about this idea a lot too, is Vegas is an instant gratification town. It's what you see is what you get. So if you like the server, you find her attractive and she made you laugh or whatever it is, and you give her a tip and both parties are satisfied. It's a complete opposite that you see with investing, where it's delayed gratification, where you invest your capital into something and you wait months to years to see the result. Here in Vegas, you want the result now. And I think that becomes exacerbated, especially with substance abuse and alcohol abuse. That instant gratification becomes less and less, down to like seconds. And so that's where you see a lot of guests, they want that to spend that $10,000 because that's the fastest way they could get that instant gratification to feel like a king.
Yeah, and that dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Speaking of servers, let's test your knowledge as a class. So you're going to turn to a partner and answer the following question. knowing how much money goes into these industries, how much is often spent at the nightclubs, I want you to come up with a figure that you think a server, a bottle girl, will make annually. In other words, what do you think her income is over the course of 1 year working for a Marquee or an Omnia? I'd like for you to turn to a partner and settle on a figure, and then we'll come back as a class.
Give them the example of for a summer this club is year long, summer's now.
Yeah, tell them the day club. The day club numbers are pretty staggering. Yeah.
By the way, for a day club, a bottle server at a day club.
Yeah.
Around accessories. Yeah.
It's so hard. Yeah. It's when I quit, everyone was like, "Oh, you're lucky. You got out," even though anyone can leave anytime that you want. That's the funny part. It's crazy. Yeah, you've been out for what now? 5 years? Maybe 14. Yeah, so it's been a while. For me, it's like 2. Yeah, so 2 years for me, coming up on 2 years. Yeah, pandemic.
One of my contacts at the foundation said he was out for 10 years. He said he works for Aria, and I was like, what club? He's like, no, I
Still since the strip closed during the pandemic, there was only 2 of us that left from the bussers from Omnia, and from what I've been told, every single busser is still there. Nobody's left. So yeah, more servers actually left than guys. Mm-hmm. So everyone, for guys, it's just harder. It's a good job too.
Let's go to this bar. Let's go to this thing. It's like, you almost feel bad if you say no. I mean, it's like your relationship. Yeah, it's like everyone's like, oh, well, James is he's not gonna go. You know, like that hurts how well the server mentions your name before it tips me. You know, so it's like, how do I play the game without playing the game? It's like, that's how I didn't go out that much. I just built really good relationships, like meaning and true, authentic conversation that I think is just so different, and that's how I added value. So even though I didn't go to the functions, my relationships didn't suffer because I had that level of depth established before guests got in, or even during the day, like calming them down, just being a really good support system. That it made okay for me not to show up to things.
It's interesting that allows you to still maintain capital with your coworkers without having to go out.
Yeah, I always thought the biggest game was before the tables came and you're sitting there with the server shooting the shit for an hour or 2. That's when you could figure out if you have a good relationship with the girl, is she gonna make you money? What's her mood? Do I have to nurture it? That's to me where the money was actually made. It was nursing the relationship with the server. Yeah.
It's like this interconnected web.
Yeah.
All right, let's come back as a class. How would you decide if you were going to leave lucrative positions, low barriers to entry, you don't have to have a degree, no formal training? How would you decide if you were a bottle service girl or one of these guys to leave? We'll start with Daniel.
I guess just for me personally, kind of what I've seen online and stuff, so you're working, right? You're making so much money, and then I think you probably get to the point where the amount of money you've made is you're able to invest it in stocks or things outside of the nightlife that you are now making more passive income than like you're working like in stocks, investments, whatever. So then you can take that passive income and just kind of do more of whatever your dream was. It was to maybe start a restaurant or like open up an animal sanctuary or do something that you always dreamed, and that job, that service, it was just a means to get to this point, and that means you just needed the money to get it.
Yeah.
How much financial literacy or forward planning and thinking are people?
Like less than 1%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was one of like the more financially literate people, and I shared everyone my knowledge, which helped me leave the industry for years, and no one engaged with it. They'd rather just buy cars and just flaunt their cash.
Yeah. And when you're in the industry too, you make a lot of cash, which doesn't get reported, so it's hard to buy homes, it's hard to qualify for things, and if you're not good with your money and you spend it keeping up with the Joneses within the industry, now you have a huge car payment, you're probably renting out a place that you're not gaining any equity in, but it looks cool from the outside. And so your lifestyle has matched the money that you made, but you're not thinking long term. So what happens if you don't get hired back the next year, or what happens if you get injured and can't work and now money's not coming in? Like, they don't think about those things. And it takes someone who's very clear as to why they're entering the industry to even have a chance at getting out. Because once you spend a year or two inside of that culture, it is ridiculously hard to get out. Like, that's why it's called golden handcuffs. You don't realize you're handcuffed because the money's so good. You're like, well, just one more year. You know what I mean? Like, 10 years later, they're still there. So like, it's wild.
A couple more perspectives on the prompt.
So actually, I have a question sort of relating to this, because you guys say that the industry has a high turnover rate, but yet people seem to be stuck in the industry. So is the high turnover rate just from those people who you have to rehire every year, is where that high turnover rate is?
Both.
Or?
So both. Like, high turnover maybe at certain clubs, but they're still in the industry. They may not be at the original club, but they're at a club.
Okay.
Yeah. Also certain positions. Manager is really high turnover rate, and VIP host also a really high turnover rate.
Okay.
But from the actual like server positions, they'll generally stay. Most will stay, and the only times you leave is if you get fired, or if you're maybe the 1% to 2% who found a way out for somehow.
Wow. Other thoughts? Let's start over here.
Yeah, I was telling Kenny, I was like, from what I've seen, like my brother just became he's like trained to be a host for a cow group, and like I told him, I was like, you either need to like, he's like, I don't even like partying that much. I said, well, but your perspective needs to be that you're gonna like take advantage of these other people's love for partying to make you more money. But he said a lot of the people that he sees, and from his experience with his ex-girlfriend, is that like all they see is like, I love partying, I will take advantage of that, or I have a nice body, I'm going to take advantage of that and make a lot of money, rather than thinking, again, like long term.
Yeah.
So it's all about that like split second of like making money and not thinking ahead.
Right.
Or like they like COVID, like
Right.
those girls, like she had a super nice car with a crazy interest rate that she could pay for, and then she couldn't, and then she's screwed. She has no idea what she's doing, because all she was doing was like pulling the cash, because she just saw cash coming in and cash going out, rather than like long term.
And like, for me, I think you're a product of your environment, right? And if you're spending a majority of your time in these types of environments, then you're gonna become a byproduct of that, most likely. And I think about the example of Heath Ledger when he played the Joker, you know, like how dark he had to get for that role and what effect that had on his life. Whether that's the reason he took his life or not, but regardless, he had to go to that dark place. And when you're in these industry areas and you're trying to maximize it, you have to almost become a part of it to understand it. And when you understand it, you get good at it. But if you're not careful, you getting good at it means you become it. And you don't even realize you became it until someone who maybe sees you from the outside is like, yo, you need to get back to your roots.
Yeah, I was saying too, like, if your partner wants you to be like boyfriend or girlfriend, is like, I don't like who you're becoming in here, or I don't like that you're being like touched by random men all the time, or just making your money off of that. Like, well, at what point does that become more important to you? Or like, it's like, well, if I leave, I'm not gonna make as much money as you're making. Like, I make more money than you. So it's like, do I leave for my relationship, or do I stay for the money? You know,
Right.
It's just like, whatever is like.
Test your character and your values.
Yep.
I'm struck when I talk to some people in the industry how much they put on blinders, to your point, James. I have a friend who's a host, and his stories, sexually speaking, are more deviant, right, than the average person. But for him, that's his normal. Like, he'll take a break, and when he takes a break, he goes to the bathroom with the guest. And this happens every day. And that's probably acceptable for his community, but then for anyone on the outside looking in, you start to wonder, like, what's driving those choices? There's no real connections being made. Everything is very much superficial, but then it becomes a lifestyle, and he's been in the industry for more than 10 years. Yeah. I saw a hand in the back, and then we'll come up here.
Two things. One, I felt like what you were saying to her was like from personal experience.
Yeah.
Like you had to get out, and it was not easy.
It wasn't easy, because you're saying no to that kind of money with only working that amount of hours. And when you're a part of a group like that, you're kind of suggested that you go out and party. You have industry nights, you have posting on your social media, like there's guidelines that they suggest you follow. And I didn't do those. I rarely went out. And for a lot of people, that can hurt your relationship with the servers who potentially can put more money in your pockets. That was a risk that I was willing to take because I knew that if I was in those environments, it would have compromised what I stood for. It helped that I was in a relationship and I had been cheated on previously in another relationship, so I didn't even want to get close to that level of temptation. So that was a big driving force as to why I said no. But that was really hard. Like, you're around really attractive people and around a lot of potential opportunity, business and personal, that is like right there. And if you're not strong, it's like just once. And then once, twice, 3 times, 8 times, 20 times, and then it's just normal.
Sliding down that slippery slope.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask
please.
the VIP hosts turnover rate, why? Why would that be high?
A lot of them get fired. A lot of hosts don't meet their quotas. They're not protected by the union, so they can be fired by any means. And it's also it's very hierarchical and a large political space when it comes to hosts. So a lot of them are competing over the whales, and then if you don't get any of the whales, then you have to go out onto the strip, and no one wants to be that guy sitting on the strip saying, hey, you want to go to a nightclub? Do you want to go to a nightclub? And so they all have quotas to meet, and if they don't meet it, then maybe it's not worth the lifestyle, because when you're a VIP host, you're on the clock 24/7. These hosts sleep 3-4 hours a night. They have to do doubles where they'll have to go work at the day club, then go work at the nightclub because you're walking the guests in. So if you're working 80, 100 hours a week and you're only pulling in $50,000 in profit, is it even worth it at that point?
A question up here, and then in the back.
Well, more of a comment than a question, but I think that this kind of reminded me of the article that we read and the podcast you guys did when you talked about the article in particular talked about how, like, for some people this is kind of just a means to a better future. So they are, to some extent, of course, the money's great and they're in it for that as well, but also a lot of these individuals are envisioning like a grand future for themselves, and so they may like you said, like try and capitalize on those potential connections that they may have with the owner or with the hosts or not the hosts, but the clients and stuff. And so and then, like, once you're, as you mentioned, James, once you're already like in it, it becomes so hard to not lose yourself in the craziness of it all. And so you're just constantly, like, you're changing as a person, because it does change you a little, but at the same time you're fighting it because you obviously don't see this as your life permanently, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard to manage that conflict. And so in an attempt not to manage it, you just succumb to it and stop fighting and just give in. And then that's when it just like sweeps you.
It's a great research project idea. Yeah. I, by the way, will be deferring to certain co-authors if I ever study the host because I get propositioned, and that's a really hard boundary for me to manage because these guys are skilled at building relationships, right? But some of them don't fully grasp that I'm there to do my job as a researcher rather than to begin a liaison. So that's always been an interesting set of interactions to have as an academic.
I just wanted to bring up, it's definitely on a lower scale working in the restaurant industry when your hostess making minimum wage or whatever it may be, and you get to a position such as serving where you are making more in tips and you are taking more at home. When I moved into that serving position, I saw that the money was there, but I also saw that people were doing it for 10 plus years, and that's now their career.
Yeah.
And that wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to be a part in. And I really definitely think that your environment controls on what opportunities you take, because if I wasn't in
an environment such as not having too many bills to pay, except for school and whatever that may be. Other people have families, a house, everything that they're depending on that money now, but it's so unpredictable because you can never guarantee that that income you made last night is what you're going to make the night of. And that was something that derailed me from doing that, is that unpredictability of what you're actually going to be taking home versus having a consistent schedule or what you're going to be making yearly. The inconsistency was what turned me away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the like unpredictability of inconsistency, your bottom line becomes higher and higher. So in the nightclub, there's very miserable people who are making $100,000 a year because one night they make 1,000, the next night they make 700, the other night they make 2,000, and even though they're making 700 a night, which is more than 99% of people, they're all very miserable because they're now it just keeps the bar keeps being raised every time.
Sergio.
How do you guys get paid exactly? Like straight up cash?
Yeah, most of it's in cash. So at the end of the night, if you have a good tip team, you could go pick up your cash directly from the servers. They all get tipped out. Also depends on the nightclub.
So this follows my next question. If you have shit of cash, how do you like financially, pay for stuff? Like, for example, so it's low living cost in Vegas for say, for rent. How do you prove you can make the money you pay off the rent? You just use shit of cash.
Yeah, for me, and I know for some friends, when it comes to buying a house, it becomes more of a negotiation where you show bank statements, but to buy a house, you need 2 years of showing pay stubs. So it's more of a prove it and having using those negotiations skills that you use in the nightclub for the real estate agent and the broker or whatever you're engaging with. Also, there's dealing with cash. There's a lot of known financial limits that you have to understand, can't deposit more than 10,000 or else it gets flagged. Are you in tip compliance? Are you out of tip compliance? So if you're not opt-in tip compliance, most of the people then find different ways of spending the dollars with gift cards or different deals.
I look at you guys like some drug dealers, honestly. Yeah. That's kind of how you guys are going to have to deal with it. How do you deposit cash into your bank account? You really can't.
Yeah. Some people don't really care. If you're in tip compliance, then it doesn't matter because then it's all on the books. But if you opt out, which a lot of people do, then you're more prone to being audited. So I've been audited actually 3 years in a row, and then it becomes a whole legal battle where the numbers are off. So then you have to hire a tax attorney, and it just becomes a 2 to 3 year battle, and you end up spending the same. It's I should have just been opted in anyway. So the IRS, even if you are right, they make your life very miserable just because they want to make it more simplistic.
Fitz.
Yeah, I think this whole situation reminded me of a story. So I am graduating next semester, or this summer, sorry. And during the event where I was getting my cap and gown and stuff, I met this banker. And he spoke to me about what comes next after school. And I thought I had this idea of what I wanted my future to be, but he asked me deep questions what do you really want to do with your life? Do you want a family? Do you want all these things that I guess come with the American dream? And I think a lot of people, particularly maybe in this industry, get stuck because they don't do a lot of that forward thinking, and so that keeps them in that position because you do need to kind of detach from it at some point to start realizing your potential, your future.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the starting point is realizing you have potential to do more than you currently are doing in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why don't we actually use this as a segue, and as our time together comes to a close, what would you like to share with the students about life since the nightlife?
Oh, man.
What you've been doing since you left the industry and some of your priorities today?
Yeah, I could kind of just share a story of just how I left the industry because it kind of plays into what I was doing now. I left the industry more so from a health standpoint. After about being in the industry for a year and a half, I realized it was not something that was sustainable. but I actually still lost myself during that time. So I became very interested in like cryptocurrency back in 2017, was making a large amount of investments over the next few years. But in 2018, there was a time where I went to a strip club and ended up spending like close to $10,000 that night, and it was like a very big wake-up call. And from that point in time of just going down the rabbit hole of going out till 1 p.m. the next day, spending money, I actually like quit drinking and went completely sober for a little over 3 years because I saw friends ODing in the nightclub, developed insomnia. That's something that happens in the nightclub scene is every single person has insomnia, but no one ever talks about it. Everyone sleeps 5 hours. You wake up every few minutes or every few hours. It's just like an underlying cause of why people feel very miserable. And so I was trying to find my way to exit out. The pandemic happened, crypto obviously took off, and it really helped me get out of the industry. But even then, when the opportunity came, when they were calling people back in 2021, it still felt hard, even though I was financially stable to quit and live off of money for a few years. I still found myself really considering if I wanted to leave or not. It was this like strange feeling. But ultimately, I left. Me and one busser left out of 60, and from what I've been told today, we're the only busters that have left since then. And so then now today I just pursue a lot of crypto stuff, host meetups, ended up founding a crypto business, and then obviously started the podcast at the same time. When everything closed, I kind of realized that the world was moving to this like creator economy, digital economy, so really just doubled down on it. And networking with people has really opened my eyes to the possibilities, and networking with people outside of the Strip. The majority of my life had been networking with people in college and then networking with people in the Strip, but it's still like in this box of things that you have limitations. You still have to be at class for a certain amount of time, or you still have to be at work for a certain amount of time. Once you start networking with people on your own time, you really understand the possibilities. And I was talking about James with this before I walked in, was like, I don't understand why I didn't leave the nightclub years before. Like I should have. Once you actually like get over that personal hurdle for a few months, and you start like living a normal life, quote unquote normal life of normal hours, you really start questioning your entire existence within the industry. It's so crazy to look back and understand all the different stuff that you go through, but wouldn't be here today without it and those experiences. But yeah, I'm one of those people who got lost in the industry and almost lost everything and came back.
Wow.
I'm just checking my lift.
Yeah.
That flight I gotta catch, but
While he's doing that, what would be one lesson you would have told the younger Jake that you know now?
Don't say yes to everything. Don't go out. Yeah, James seems like he was able to withstand a lot of that, but I was somebody who went out to all of the nightclub nights, all the day club nights, because everything is comped, trying to hook up with all the servers, staying out, being very free with your money. You can make $500 in a night, but then you just go spend it the next day, and you're like, oh, I'll make it back tomorrow. That was something a loop that a lot of us get caught in, which I did, and I wish I could have told myself is, I'll make it tomorrow, I'll make it back the next night, I'll make it back the next night. So it took me a long time to understand that, but I wish I would have told myself that prior.
Yeah. 2020 hindsight, right? James, how about for you? You decided to leave?
I decided to leave. I grew up in a really good support system, and I was lucky to have that to lean on while I was there to keep me grounded. Obviously, my wife, which was my girlfriend at the time, really supported me and reminded me who I was and made me stay in my morals. But I knew right around the time I started that I wanted to speak and coach people all over the world. So I got Employee of the Week one week, brought a piece of Tony Robbins CDs, put that in the box that they gave me, and I brought it to everybody, and I said, thank you for voting for me for Employee of the Week, and I want to do this one day. And the GM, our driver's here, the GM said, I want to give you an opportunity. So he let me speak motivationally to the staff at Wet Republic, which is something that had never been done before, every Friday for the 2 seasons that I was there. So a total of 64 speeches. And every time I spoke, people kept saying, you got a gift, you got a gift, you got to pursue it. So after that second season, I put my 2 weeks in, and I went out and door knocked businesses, pitching myself, my services for 6 months, questioning whether I made the right decision. Luckily, someone at the end of that 6 months believed in me enough to give me an interview, second interview, pitched a 30-day trial at that company, grew their company by 20%, and they said, let's do this for a year. That year turned into 4 years, and that was the foundation of my business. Now I get to travel all over the world working with leaders and companies to help them get out of their own way, be their best versions of themselves, and live life on their terms. And so I had the honor of working with over 8,000 people now from 10 different countries, continuing to learn, continuing to serve, and continuing to speak my story in hopes that if you hear it, it can inspire you to follow whatever your dream is. So
James is actually going to run to catch a flight. Please join me in thanking both Jake and James for coming to class. Thank you guys so much.